There's a kind of emptiness no one else can see, but you can feel it in every quiet moment. It's when you wake up in the morning and no one calls your name, when meals are too silent, with no one to share even a small story, when you want to tell someone something, but you don't know who to call, so you just sit quietly, looking out the window. It's not just loneliness, it's the kind of silence that lasts so long, you start to question your own worth, as if you're slowly fading out of other people's lives. I know that feeling. And I also know, getting through it doesn't mean waiting for someone to come and rescue you. It means learning how to open a door from the inside. In this video, I want to share with you 4 golden keys. They're not magical solutions, but they're things that helped me, and many other older adults, rediscover what it feels like to be connected, to live authentically, and to feel needed in a gentle, meaningful way. If you feel like you've been sitting in the quiet room of loneliness, stay with me a little longer. Maybe one of these keys will unlock the very door you've been waiting to open. Someone once told me, loneliness doesn't kill you in a day, it saps your life force little by little, day by day. But fortunately, there is no door without a key, even the silent door called loneliness. And the first key, which is also where all changes begin, lies in something that seems easy but is very difficult: daring to name your own loneliness. Loneliness doesn't always come with tears or complaints. Sometimes it's just a morning that feels too quiet. It's when you eat alone and no one asks what you'd like today. It's when you want to share something but don't know who to call. It creeps in like fog, formless, subtle, but makes you feel invisible even in your own home. I've been there. In the early years after my husband passed away, I lived alone and tried to keep a steady routine. I'd make coffee in the morning, read the paper, water the plants. Everything on the outside seemed fine, but inside, it wasn't. I told myself I was strong, that living alone was normal, but the truth was, I was hiding. I was afraid that if I admitted I was lonely, people would pity me. I was afraid my children and grandchildren would think I was weak. And most of all, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to bear it if I said it out loud. Then one day, while going through an old drawer of papers, I came across a handwritten letter from an old friend. The ink had faded with time, but the warmth in those words was still there. We used to write to each other every month, sharing the smallest things: a nice meal, a good movie, a quiet sadness. And I realized, I used to be someone who stayed connected. I used to need my friends. I used to express how I felt, without shame. That letter was like a mirror, reflecting back the version of me I'd forgotten. And I cried. Not because I missed my friend, but because for the first time, I looked my loneliness in the eye, without turning away. From that day on, I started something small, writing down my feelings each morning. Just a few lines, nothing fancy. Today I feel sad. Today I feel empty. Today I miss laughter. And strangely, as I wrote, I felt lighter. I no longer thought of myself as odd or weak. I felt real. I also started being more honest with my family. When my child called and asked, "Are you okay, Mom?" I stopped replying with the usual, "I'm fine." Some days I would say, "I feel a little down today." And what I didn't expect was this. When I became honest, they became more open with me too. The conversations grew warmer, more meaningful. It wasn't just polite check-ins anymore. It became true listening. I've learned that loneliness doesn't disappear on its own, but it loses its power each time we dare to face it. It stops ruling us when we learn to name it as a valid human emotion. We don't need to run from it. We just need to be honest. The first key to stepping out of loneliness isn't to immediately find someone to talk to or to fill the day with distractions. It's to pause and admit to yourself, "I feel lonely." That sentence may sound fragile, but it's one of the strongest things you can say, because only when you acknowledge it can real change begin. Once we find the courage to admit we're feeling lonely, that moment becomes the beginning of awakening. But if we stop there, If we only recognize it without doing anything about it, that feeling will return, gently but persistently. What I came to understand afterward was this: I couldn't heal loneliness through thoughts alone. I needed action. I needed to do something, anything, even something small, to pull myself out of that stillness. And so I started again from a place that seemed unimportant at first, the rhythm of my daily routine. When I first became honest about my loneliness, I thought that would be enough to feel lighter. But it wasn't. Just a few days later, the emptiness returned, quietly, just like before. That's when I realized, if I just sat still and stared at my emotions, I would keep getting pulled into that same cycle. I needed to do something, not just to pass the time, but to bring meaning back into days that had started to feel aimless. At that point, every day felt like a loop. Wake up, make coffee, turn on the TV, eat something simple, then sit and stare out at the yard. There was no highlight, no motivation, nothing that made me feel like today is different from yesterday. I asked myself, is this really how the rest of my life is going to pass? Then one morning, instead of sitting still, I picked up a blank notebook. I told myself, today, I'll choose 3 small things to do. Just 3. But I'll do them with the mindset of someone who is alive. I wrote down: 1. Arrange a new vase of flowers. 2. Call my old friend Linda. 3. Walk outside for 10 minutes. These simple actions changed my entire day. I no longer felt like I was waiting for time to pass. I felt like I was living through it. From then on, I began gently rebuilding a routine that had intention. I called my morning time an hour for me. During that hour, I wouldn't turn on the TV or rush through chores. I'd simply do something that felt meaningful. Write a few lines in my journal, read 1 page of a book, or just sit and watch the sunlight through the window while taking a deep breath. Strangely, those small acts became anchors for my spirit. Even if no one came to visit, even if I had no particular plans, I still felt like I was truly present in my own day. You see, loneliness doesn't have to disappear, but when you create a rhythm in your life that holds meaning, you slowly reclaim your sense of agency. You stop feeling like you're just existing and start feeling like you're truly living. Some days I'd only write a few words in my notebook, yet it felt like I was having a conversation with a friend. Some days I'd brew tea and wait for the leaves to open, and in that moment, I knew I could still feel peace, still experience joy, even while living alone. You don't need a grand plan. You don't need to stay busy all day. All you need is one small, meaningful habit repeated daily, and it becomes the anchor that keeps your soul from drifting in the sea of empty days. The second key to overcoming loneliness isn't doing a lot. It's doing one meaningful thing every day with intention. Start today. Write down 3 things you want to do. Create a quiet morning space just for yourself. You don't have to change your whole life. You just need to awaken the rhythm within you. And from there, loneliness slowly makes room for connection, with yourself and with life again. When I started building a daily rhythm for myself, even just a few small tasks, I felt a little less empty inside. But then there were those late afternoons, when everything was done, and I found myself sitting quietly, wondering, do I have anyone to share what just happened today? That's when I realized, people can live alone, but we can't live forever without connection. And so, I reached for the next key, a key that wasn't about crowds or being surrounded by many people, but about finding one person, just one, to connect with, sincerely. After some time of rebuilding my own daily rhythm, I started to feel more grounded. Each day had something to do, a reason to wake up early, a little joy in watering the plants or making tea. But then, in certain moments, I still felt an emptiness. I wanted to tell someone that the rose in the yard had just bloomed, or that I had just reread an old letter that moved me deeply, but I didn't know who to call. The phone numbers were there, some old friends, a few relatives. But for some reason, I kept hesitating. I was afraid of bothering someone. I was afraid it would be awkward. And deep down, I was afraid of being rejected. One day, I gathered my courage and called Nancy, a friend from an old Tai Chi class I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years. The call started out a little awkward, with both of us asking each other to repeat things. But after just a few minutes, we were laughing about old stories, about forgetting poses in class. The conversation lasted only 20 minutes, but it warmed my heart. That day, I realized I didn't need a big group of friends or noisy gatherings. I just needed one person who would listen, and to whom I could also listen, genuinely. After that call, I began a new habit, calling one person each week. Not everyone answered, but those who did were warm and surprised. Some asked how I was doing, some shared stories about their grandchildren. One person even got teary because it had been so long since anyone had called just to check in, without asking for anything. Slowly, those small connections became threads that tied me back to the world. Just one thread, but strong. What I learned is this: connection doesn't have to be grand. You don't need a planned meeting or a buzzing group chat. Sometimes it's just a message that says, "I was thinking of you today," a photo of a home-cooked meal, or a short weekend greeting. Especially for older adults, genuine connection is what makes our hearts feel seen and valued. I also realized something else important. Sometimes, the person you're waiting to hear from is someone who was once close, but because of time, distance, or a small misunderstanding, you lost touch. If someone just came to mind, someone you once cared about, that might be the person you should reach out to first. Don't wait for them to call. Don't assume they've forgotten. They might be waiting for you, just as you've been waiting for them. This third key doesn't ask you to open up to everyone. It simply reminds you that even one person, a real connection, is enough to work a quiet kind of magic in your journey out of loneliness. And if you're thinking, "I don't have anyone to call," then start with someone you once cherished, someone you haven't spoken to in a while. And if no one comes to mind, try joining a small class, a local community gathering, or even chatting with the familiar cashier at the grocery store. A genuine connection can begin with a simple hello, and from that hello, you might rediscover something you thought you'd lost long ago. The feeling of being seen, remembered, and cared for by another human being. As I began to rekindle a few connections, even just short phone calls or hesitant messages, I felt my heart start to find something to hold on to. But then, there were moments when fear crept in. What if they're too busy? What if they don't remember me the way I remember them? The more I connected, the more I became afraid of becoming dependent, of feeling hurt if others didn't respond the way I hoped. And that's when I learned another important lesson. That while connection is essential, to truly move beyond loneliness, we must learn to open our hearts without becoming dependent. That is the final key. The one that helps keep our hearts steady, day by day. I used to think that as long as someone was beside me, as long as someone cared, loneliness would disappear. But life doesn't work that simply. There were times when a close friend got busy and didn't call for a whole week. Once I texted a relative and only received a quiet "seen" in return. Those moments left me feeling empty, like I had placed my heart in someone else's hands, hoping they would hold it gently, only to watch it quietly slip away. It was these small experiences that taught me an important lesson. Opening your heart is a good thing, but relying entirely on others to feel valued is never sustainable. If we don't learn how to fill ourselves up from within, every connection becomes a place for expectation. And when expectations go unmet, they turn into wounds. So I began turning inward, not to close off, but to build a stronger foundation for myself. I learned to befriend silence. Each afternoon, I sat outside on the porch for 10 minutes, without my phone, without the TV, just watching the trees, listening to the birds, and hearing the quiet of my own thoughts. It felt a little uneasy at first, but slowly, I began to feel more grounded. I started writing letters to myself, notes I would never send, just to remind myself, I'm still here, I'm still living, I'm still worthy of care, starting with my own. I cooked meals I loved, listened to old songs, or painted simple shapes with bright colors, not to make art, but just to feel joy. And once I felt okay within myself, I began to reach out to others again, not because I was empty, but because I had something to share. Strangely, when I stopped depending on other people's responses to determine my worth, my relationships became lighter, more genuine. I didn't feel disappointed if someone was too busy to return a call. I didn't feel hurt if a message got a short reply. I understood they had lives of their own, and I was still whole. Loneliness, in truth, doesn't come from being alone. It comes from forgetting ourselves. But if we can remember, if we can embrace ourselves, care for ourselves, then even in solitude, we won't feel empty. The final key to overcoming loneliness is learning to open your heart without becoming dependent. To stay open to love if it comes, but not crumble if it doesn't. When we can do that, loneliness loses its power. It becomes just a feeling, passing through like a cloud. And the most beautiful part is this: when we learn to light our own fire, others, if they come, are drawn to the warmth. Not because we asked them to, but because we've already become a gentle source of light. You see, loneliness doesn't go away just because we try to fill our time. And it isn't something we can sweep aside with a few quick conversations. But when we dare to name our own loneliness, when we begin to create a small, meaningful rhythm to our days, when we bravely reach out, even to just one person, and when we learn to love ourselves without depending on others, we begin to hold the first keys to stepping out of that shadow. We may not always be able to avoid quiet, empty afternoons, but there are still things we can choose: to look at ourselves with a gentler gaze, to send a message instead of waiting, to begin the day with a slow cup of tea, and to believe that growing older can still be warm, still be beautiful, and still be deeply connected. If today's reflections have spoken to you, I hope you'll try even just one small thing from these 4 keys. And if you found this video helpful, please click like, share it with someone you think might need a little warmth, and subscribe so we can meet again on the next part of this journey. Wishing you a gentle day, and if you're alone right now, please remember, I'm here and I'm thinking of you. See you again soon.